Good afternoon. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Thursday, June 22nd, 2023. It is 1:09 p.m. This session is set to go until 2 p.m. Though Matt did say he could get it done before then. This is a hybrid meeting. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue South East, Room 110 for public virtual attendance. You may follow along with Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia, I'm the chair of the board. To my right is Vice Chair Ty Menzer. To my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards. Also in the boardroom, we have County Manager Romero Chavez. We assume we have Assistant County Manager Rob Gelder, and we're going to be discussing the tip briefing from Public Works. And we have Matt Unselman, our county engineer, who's going to be leading the presentation.
All right. Thank you, and I'm joined today over my shoulder by Teresa Parsons, who is our design manager in Public Works, and by Brian Meyer and Marcus Orbit, who are our senior civil engineers in our design division in Public Works. And my name is Matt Unselman. As Commissioner Mejia said, I'm the county engineer. Today I'll be presenting the 2024 to 2029 draft Transportation Improvement Program, or otherwise known as the TIP. No decision is needed at the end of this briefing, except maybe some direction to send Public Works to give direction to Public Works to set a public hearing. The public hearing must be held prior to approving the budget. There are 8 different chapters in the TIP. In this presentation, I'll quickly present the highlights from each chapter. So some quick things to know about the TIP. The TIP is the planning department, or excuse me, the planning document, which guides the transportation improvements for the next 6 years. It's updated annually. It satisfies the legislative requirements that I'll be talking about shortly. There's a public involvement process, as I mentioned, with the public hearing. And once adopted, the TIP satisfies the legislative requirements for the Transportation Growth Management Act, as well as the distribution of state and federal dollars for transportation projects. So, county manager's on it. He already flipped ahead. Chapter 1. So Chapter 1 provides for all the legal and regulatory requirements behind the TIP that guide our transportation program. I'm not going to go through each requirement due to our limited time today, and frankly, it's probably, I'm just going to give you the highlights. The Board of County Commissioners must annually adopt a 6-year transportation program that includes a prioritized list of projects showing costs and funding sources. It needs to include an annual road program, which is basically just the first year of the 6-year plan, and I'll discuss that a little bit more later on. The plan must also address any critical findings that are found while doing our bridge inspections throughout the year that are included in our bridge index, which is included as Chapter 8 of the TIP. So Chapter 2 includes all the funding sources for the projects included in the TIP. Some funding sources include the road levy portion of the property tax, the state gas tax, transportation impact fees, REAP funding, and federal and state grants. Now, it's important to note that we also, most of the time, will utilize smaller amounts of local funding to leverage for much larger state or federal grants. Two examples of this that will be coming to your attention here in the fall is we have 2 projects. The first project is the intersection of South Bay and Johnson Point Road. We're doing a roundabout. That roundabout, we utilized a small amount of local funds to secure approximately $3 million in surface transportation block grant funding or federal funding. The other project that you're going to hear from myself about is the Marvin Road project. And on that project, we utilized transportation impact fees of much smaller amount to secure more than $3.5 million of Transportation Improvement Board or TIB or state funding. So we're always looking to leverage those local funds. So the next chapter, go ahead.
Madam Chair, just a quick question.
Go ahead.
On the Marvin Road, in terms of the funding, at some point we were selling some concurrency credits.
Yep.
Do you know how much money do we have on that concurrency credit?
how much we've collected from that. And off the top of my head, it's well in excess of $1 million. And we use that funding to advance the design and the right of way so that we're in position to go ahead and apply for the construction funding.
We'll have a point to ask about particular projects. That maybe
Absolutely.
we didn't- Okay.
Look forward to it. Chapter 3. Chapter 3 provides a 6-year look at revenue and expenditures within the road fund. This chapter also provides a summary of fees collected and the amount of amounts used for transportation projects, which is required per county code. The numbers are included in red because we're still in the process of putting our public works budget together at this point. But prior to the public hearing, those numbers will be finalized. And you'll get an opportunity to review those final numbers during your review of the public works budget as well. Transportation impact fees are a one-time fee that developers pay to help finance their proportionate share of the cost of the roads, parks, schools, and other facilities to serve the new developments. These funds must clearly link to adding capacity to the transportation system and other facilities to serve their new developments. Typically, we can expect to receive between $1.5 and $2 million of transportation impact fees each year. Currently, we have about $8.5 million in funding available. In 2022, we spent a little over $1 million on impact fees for such projects as US 12 and Sergeant Road Roundabout. We use some for the design and right-of-way at Marvin Road. We use some to advance design and right-of-way of the Johnson Point and Hawks Prairie Roundabout. And then we use some in the construction of the Yelm Highway and Meridian Roundabout, which was recently completed. This year, we have $3 million of impact fees planned for projects. In 2024, we have another $1 million planned for projects. We don't have a county road fund estimate or forecast to share with you at this time because, as I mentioned, we're still putting our public works budget together, but it will be included in the final version of the TIP for your approval. Chapter 4 basically describes how we prioritize projects that arrive in the TIP. Projects are included on the TIP through a vigorous prioritization process. There are 9 different programs that prioritize projects for the TIP. These programs include the ADA program, the bridge program, the capacity or traffic congestion program, the culvert program, fish passage program, highway safety improvement or the safety program, the maintenance and operations program, the pavement preservation program, and the pedestrian and bicycle program. Each one of these programs has criteria to prioritize which projects arrive on the TIP. I'm going to use the bridge program as an example. So when we're considering what bridges we want to advance for replacement and include on the TIP, we consider such things as what's the condition of the bridge? How susceptible is it to high flow events? Meaning, are the foundation, is that bridge at risk for material being washed away from underneath the foundations during a high flow event? Does it have any secured funding to date? What's the priority of the route that the bridge carries? What's the traffic volume that's included on that road? So, and another thing to note about our TIP is that we try as much as possible to include projects from all of these different programs because we never know what funding, we can try to predict what funding opportunities is going to become available, but we know that whatever opportunity does become available, we'll have a project that should be competitive. So Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is our annual work program. The annual work program is required to be submitted to the County Road Administration Board each year per WAC 136-16. As Commissioner Mejia can tell you, it's part of our standards of good practice practices. It's basically just the list of projects that we plan on working on in the upcoming year. But occasionally, we have to come back to the board throughout the year when there's an unplanned project or an emergency project that needs to be added to the annual work program. We try to be proactive, but turns out we can't predict landslides, we can't predict earthquakes, we can't predict floods. So we're always gonna have unplanned projects. Included on the list of projects for the annual work program is the funding sources and how that funding will be distributed between the different phases of the project, the preliminary design, the right-of-way, and the construction phases of the project. On to chapter 6.
Can I ask a question real quick about chapter 5?
Absolutely.
The Thurston County Action Plan, what is that? What is that? What does that include?
Thank you. So the Thurston County Action Plan, if you remember earlier this week, I requested permission to execute a contract for SS4A, Safe Streets for All funding. And so we're gonna be developing, actually, we're not gonna be developing, we're gonna be updating our local county road safety plan to meet the requirements of the Safe Streets for All funding. And at the conclusion of that effort, we'll have what's called an action plan. It's just basically our local county road safety plan that meets all of the new federal requirements.
Thank you.
But-
And then one more,
Go for it.
the countywide electrical services project.
Okay, so on that, we're currently in the design phase of that project. And at strategic intersections where we've had some collision history issues, I'll give some examples, like on Rainier Road, we're gonna be providing street lighting systems like at the intersection of Spurgeon Creek and Rainier Road and Fir Tree and Rainier Road and some other key intersections along Rainier Road. But we'll also be doing that along some intersections on Yelm Highway and some intersections along Little Rock Road as well. So it's basically a street light enhancement project.
Okay, thank you.
Chapter 6. So, Commissioner Mejia was one slide ahead. So chapter 6 contains the list of projects that Public Works plans on working on in the next 6 years. Only one project has been added to the list this year, and that is the State Route 507 and Vale Road Roundabout. The reason we're only adding one project is because we added 6 or 7 projects last year as studies. And those studies are advancing, a lot of those studies are advancing as projects this year. There's one project that is getting a name change, and Commissioner Mejia got it. It's the local county road safety plan is becoming an action plan just because of the type of funding that we're using to update our plan. We're removing 6 different projects from the TIP, from last year's TIP, and that's because they have been completed already or they will be completed by the end of the year. Those projects include the Yelm and Meridian Roundabout, the Vale Road project between 138th and 153rd, the US 12 and Sergeant Road Roundabout, which was recently completed. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to take a look. It's pretty cool. It's awesome, huh?
Are we planning a ribbon cutting?
There will be a ribbon cutting. We're in the process of scheduling it. It should be here in the next month or 2.
With the funding partners?
With the funding partners. Yep. The Pacific Avenue Safety Improvement Project has recently been completed. I think you're all very aware of the Black Lake Bridge Approach Project, which, by the way, is scheduled for construction here in a couple weeks, and it will be completed by the end of the year. The Thurston County Mobility Strategy, and then we completed a project to repair some rail and repair some pile caps on the Steamboat Island Bridge. The next chapter, chapter 7, focuses on the 20-year capacity project list. And this list of projects is also included in our comprehensive plan, as well as our transportation impact fee program. These projects are used to keep us in compliance with the requirements included in the Growth Management Act. So basically, we routinely evaluate our intersections, not only for current traffic conditions, but also for those forecasted volumes 20 years in the future. And so that's how we identify which projects we need to add to our 20-year list to make sure that we're in compliance, not now, but also 20 years into the future. And then chapter 8, here is the bridge index. So the Washington Administrative Code requires counties to submit a written report of bridge inspection efforts as well as any findings. We're required to inspect any bridge that's longer than 20 feet every 2 years. We have 104 bridges in our inventory that are longer than 20 feet long. However, we elect to inspect all 150 bridges in our inventory for safety reasons. Last year, we performed 96 inspections. And some additional facts about our bridge inventory is that 17 bridges in our inventory exceeded the theoretical lifespan of 75 years. 23 of them are considered scour critical. Scour critical simply means that the bridges have foundations that are at higher risk of washing out during flood events. 19 of our bridges are functionally obsolete, which just means that they're structurally sound, but they may be lacking bicycle or ped facilities, or they may not have enough travel lanes on them. The good news is we don't have any structurally deficient bridges. And what that means is we don't have any bridges in our bridge inventory that are in imminent danger of failure. Oh, you had that look.
Well, there must be one bridge that doesn't have any rods, metal rods or something in it. Isn't there something like that?
Once again, stealing my thunder. That's that's coming up, I promise.
Oh, okay.
And
I thought maybe that's what he was, I was trying to read his mind.
You did correctly.
Oh,
exactly.
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Onto bridge repairs. In 2022, we made significant repairs to the Steamboat Island Road Bridge as well as the Hawks Prairie Road Bridge. In 2023, we have plans to make further repairs to the guardrail on the Steamboat Island Road Bridge. And again, you're well aware of the Black Lake Bridge project.
The Steamboat Island Road Bridge, which one?
It's at the very end.
Oh.
If you haven't been out there, I would strongly encourage you to go out there. It's a good spot.
It's a beautiful drive.
It is a beautiful drive.
I go there quite frequently.
Yeah, it's on the way to Louisa's
Yeah.
place, you know.
In 2022, we completed construction of 3 bridges, including the new Little Rock Road Bridge near Sargent Road. We completed a new bridge on Latico Road at Spurgeon Creek. And we put in a new box culvert on Houston Drive at Houston Creek. These 3 bridges were all part of our Fish Passage program. So we do not have any bridges planned for construction in 2023, but we currently are in the design phase and actually in the right-of-way acquisition process for a project to replace the Little Rock Road Bridge over Bloom's Ditch near 113th Avenue, which that bridge is 100 years old. And as Commissioner Edwards correctly assessed, it has no rebar in it. So that's a good one to replace. And that's another example where we leveraged a smaller amount of local funding to secure federal funding, I think somewhere in magnitude of $2 million to replace that bridge. And we'll also be making some intersection improvements to the intersection of 113th and Little Rock as part of that project as well. The other top 2 identified bridge replacement priorities in the county include the Yelm Highway Bridge near the Amtrak station, as well as the Tilley Road Bridge over Beaver Creek. All right, next steps. If directed by the Board of County Commissioners to do so today, we'll put together an AIS to schedule a public hearing. We need to have that public hearing in advance of approving the budget. We'll finalize the tip with the budget numbers before the public hearing. And hopefully you'll adopt the tip prior to the budget so that we can have a transportation program next year, and we'll do it all again next year. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
Are you responsible for the municipal bridges as well? I just
No.
see that it's referring to.
Yes, those are, so we have some interlocal agreements with the city of Yelm and the city of Rainier,
Tenino.
or Tenino. Thank you, to provide the bridge inspection services for them because they don't have the capacity on staff to provide those inspection services on their own. So it's something that we can do to be a good neighbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Munster?
Yeah, so on, map A,
Uh-oh. Okay, map A.
your summary of the maps is correct, but when you look at the, close-up of map A, you've got Country Club Road on Steamboat Island, and it should be on Cooper Point.
Yes, it should definitely not be on Steamboat Island. It should be on Cooper Point.
It should be right there, so you need to move down.
Thank you so much.
Yep,
We'll get that
question
corrected.
on traffic impact fees. So I know there's like all these funding sources coming in and they change based on the project, but the impact fees have that time limit, right? Like 10 years.
10 years.
So given that you have that, is there any incentive to just like, is there a limit to how many traffic impact fees you can use on a project?
Yes.
Or what percentage of the project
there
can be
is, 'cause
funded by?
You hit on it. So you can only fund the portion of the project that is adding capacity. So like, you can't fully fund a project with transportation impact fees.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense, because I was just gonna say, otherwise you just use them all, right? Like, do a whole project with it just to make sure that if other funding sources didn't have that same.
You said it perfectly. That's one of those opportunities where we're gonna leverage those smaller amount of impact fees to go after those bigger amounts of state and federal funding.
Okay. The only other question I had was about the project. I'm just wondering about the status. Like, I know there's the timeline, right? There's design and you're looking for funding and stuff. So there's that big project that you guys did scoping on around Evergreen Parkway in Harrison, whether you put 2 roundabouts or whatever, and people were chiming in. Where does that project stand?
So that project, we advanced that project to 30% design, and we're currently looking for funding opportunities for that project. That's an expensive project.
Yeah. So
I
it's kind of right in, somewhere in the middle of the list, sort of thing.
Yeah, we haven't, I would say preliminary design's been completed. We haven't begun any right-of-way acquisition. So we're gonna need to find a larger funding a larger funding opportunity to go ahead and fund that project.
And can you remind me what the like motivating factor for that project is? Is it that there's safety concerns with people making the lefts, or is it about just too much traffic, or what?
It's the lefts. So when you're getting off the off ramps, there's so much through traffic on Mud Bay, it's
Yeah.
difficult to take a left. So at that point, it becomes,
People take risks.
they take risks. So it's a safety, but then it's also a traffic congestion
Guilty
issue.
as charged. So now,
What's
I mean,
that?
I go through there all the time, so I'm like, yeah, there's like, it's like, I'm teaching my kids to drive, and it's like, we try to avoid that, right? Because it's dangerous, like, like figuring out, because you don't know where the lanes are collapsing on both sides.
Mhm.
But if you're not familiar with the like, I know it because I've memorized it, but if you're a new driver through that area, it's like, you wouldn't know that.
Yeah, and it's difficult because you have a lot of volume that's going straight through that intersection. But you also have to cross a lot of lanes of traffic to get over into the correct lane too. So it is difficult, and it's difficult to cross there as a pedestrian too. So that's
Mainly safety, it's mainly a safety type project.
safety, but there's also some traffic congestion benefits to doing a roundabout at both of those off ramps.
Those are my questions.
Okay, and I already asked my questions. County Manager, do you
I
have?
already did. I'm good.
Not really. Good
Rob
job.
has questions. Rob, go ahead.
I actually don't have a question, but thank you. I just have to say that this tip, as of all the documents as I've been onboarding, is probably one of the most informative, well laid out tip documents that I've had the opportunity to review in my career anyway. So kudos to everybody.
The county manager is very happy about your comments, so. Okay, thank you, Rob. Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you, Matt. It is 1:34. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Rob, take it.